Hey guys, and welcome back to the podcast. I have a quick announcement for you today. We have launched a separate YouTube channel specifically for the podcast. So it's separate from the Grace Cart channel we used to post on. So if you have not subscribed to that yet, follow the link down in the show notes, and that'll take you there where you can subscribe, hit the bell icon, and let's grow the subscriber count together. You know, that's a great way to be able to support the time that goes into the show and the time that goes into interviewing really cool people in this industry, which today we are interviewing Cody Hopkins from GrassRoots Co-Op, which was an absolute blast for Blaine and I to just talk shop with another scaled, successful farm-to-fork e-commerce brand. I mean, these guys have scaled a heck of a business. We're talking about multi seven figures. So you'll get to hear us in this episode just geek out over, you know, their e-commerce metrics, like related to customer acquisition and how they've scaled the brand over time. We also dug into the co-op business model and the structure of that. You know, we got to ask Cody what he likes, what he doesn't like. And I think that'll be interesting if you've ever considered partnering together with farms in your area to be able to create markets and distribution together. I think you're going to really enjoy this. So without further ado, if you're new to the show, my name's Brooks Hitzfield. I co-host it with my brother Blaine, and we are with Seven Sons. So we have an e-commerce brand where we direct market grass-fed beef, pastured pork, poultry. And, you know, we really started the show to basically just share lessons that we're learning, interview other similar businesses to share some of their insights. Because, you know, there wasn't content like this for us as we were getting started. So if you enjoy, you know, listening and geeking out to things related to business, marketing, and finance, that's the topics that we like to discuss on the show. So if that all sounds good to you, be sure to hit subscribe. And without further ado, let's get into the episode with Cody. All right, we're live and recording. Cody, I love that you came here in person for a podcast interview. We like to do them in person. I don't know, Zoom, when I listen to a Zoom podcast, it's not the same. So thank you for making this possible. Everyone listening. Yeah, you can thank Cody for coming in here in person. So Cody, you're one of the founders behind GrassRoots Co-op, one of the most successful direct-to-consumer meat companies out there. And so there's a lot of different directions I think we can go with the podcast here and things we can talk about. And I want to get in a lot of different areas, but to try to focus this, I think three areas that Blaine and I would like to kind of zone in a little bit is I think our listeners would really be interested in the same things that we're interested to learn about, which is, going deep into your guys' customer acquisition strategy and the growth over the years, what's worked really well, and, break down some tactics that have been really key and big for you guys there. Also, the co-op structure. We've had a lot of different clients that we've worked over the years who've tried it and it's not gone well. So I would be really curious to hear what you like about yours and what people can learn from that. And then also just how you think about scale when you're thinking long-term for the future and what, Blaine and I have lots of conversations about scale with Seven Sons and when do we see our next scale ceiling and what do we need to do to break through that? So I think that'll be an engaging point to jump into too. Is there anything I missed that you want to focus on here today?
That was my priorities as well. So,
cool. Yeah. So if that sounds good though, I'd like to just start by let's go all the way back and get a little bit of the origin story. And then maybe we can stop there and talk a little bit about what the business is like today. But even going before the origin story, I'd like to talk about Cody a little bit and let's go all the way back. I think if I want to do this is go back to high school. What were you like back in high school, and was farming something that you ever thought that you'd be doing?
Yeah, no, I grew up in rural Arkansas, and my family had 40 acres, but no real farming. I think my grandpa maybe had a chicken house back in the day for that was maybe 30, 40 feet wide by, 60 feet long or something like that. So, I come from the heart of Tyson country, which is where the integrator model really came out of. So, but no, did not think that I would be, I went to a public school, ended up being naturally good at math. So I kind of excelled in that area, played some sports, was the first person in my family to ever go to college. And didn't think about college until a couple months before the end of my senior year of high school. Grew up pretty poor, pretty rural, so went off to college and ended up going to a liberal arts college in Arkansas, and got a degree in physics and math. But I had an experience about halfway through where I went and a couple of experiences. One was I went and I worked at a restaurant in the Northeast that really turned me on to to food. And we grew up with a big garden.
Okay.
My grandparents were very like salt of the earth hillbillies. Like I'm a fifth generation Arkansan, but they were all just like hard scrabble, like canning, and it was something that like I kind of rejected as a kid.
Yeah.
But as I moved away and got into college, I just was like, there was something about that I just really like missed, and started to realize the connection to the land and eating that we had. That was something that was just it sort of conjured these emotions in me that I didn't really know that I didn't really appreciate it as a kid. But then I started to like really miss it as I moved away from where I grew up. And so
what do you think like made you miss it? Like as you're and like, do you have a memory of when like that started to connect the dots where you're like, cause I grew up like also, like I made an oath to myself, like farming, that is not for me. It's not in my blood.
Yeah.
So kind of like, but obviously, things have changed. So like, yeah, like how did that thinking start to change for you?
That's a really great question. So, I mean, farming was not even a consideration. Even like it was never even a thought in my mind, and when I was younger, even probably until, I would say 2004, 5 range. Okay. 2006, I read, The Omnivore's Dilemma. That was like a moment for me. I read about Joel, and I was like, wow, that sounds really interesting. So I would say that, the thing that I like kind of missed, or like there was a moment where I worked at this restaurant, and they were so into the ingredients and where they were coming from. And, it just triggered this, like, man, like I grew up, like it was this very like fancy place up in, outside of Providence, Rhode Island. And, I was this guy from Arkansas, grew up in the middle of nowhere. I had a friend. It was my first time to really be out of the South. And I just ended up going up there, getting a job kind of on a whim, and saw like how serious they were taking the food, the sourcing, the farmers they were working with. And I was like, golly, I didn't necessarily have this clear of a thought at the time, but in retrospect, I think it was just like, wow, all of these people are like really making a big fuss over this thing, and this is what I grew up with.
Yeah, that's what you're used to, right?
Yeah. And I'm like, golly, that's like like I had something that these people are paying hundreds of dollars to come eat.
Yep.
And then like I also had this feeling of like I just like rural areas. Like I'd like to visit a city, but there's a connection to the land and to like there was something about that. Like we spent a lot of time as kids out in the woods or going hunting.
Yeah.
And that was just a deep seated part of me, and I sort of rejected for a period of time wanting to live in rural, because it was just like the thing, like young people don't stay in rural America.
It's always greener somewhere.
Yeah. So that was those are the kind of things that were going on, and
that makes sense.
Yeah.
So what got you then from there, getting back? I mean, kind of lead us to the grassroots origin. Like I think you went and started a farm yourself, right? Yep. Is that how it started?
Yeah.
Okay.
So after college, I spent a couple years teaching high school math and physics back up in the Northeast. And then I was just at a place where I was like, golly, I don't want to be in a classroom all day. I do like teaching, but I have this thing about food that I'm interested in. And so, and I also, really miss being back in the South and in a rural area. And so I moved back to Arkansas to manage a bakery. I got into bacon bread. And so I started working at this sourdough bakery in the Ozarks, which is not where I grew up, but a couple hours away.
Yep.
And it was just one of those, like, what am I going to do with my life moments, And so I was living there, managing that. And that was where I got my first taste of small business. Okay. And that was something that, like, really, like, I found just I'm someone that is, I love to solve complex, hard problems. I'm more of a vision type person too, so I can definitely think ahead, and I just couldn't stop like thinking, oh, we could do this to improve, and this to improve profitability, and this would improve the customer experience. So it just like triggered the entrepreneur in me in some way. And then I was also having this food thing that was going on, working at this bakery, and I was trying to figure out, what am I going to do? Is it, do I go back to college and get like a master's in rural economic development or what? And then 2 things happened. One is I got introduced to my now wife, who is from that area. She was just graduated from college. I was a few years out. We met. She was very much like, we just had a lot of really common interest in food, rural living. Farming was something we both kind of just, she kind of grew up on a small homesteader type of place. And then I also read Omnivore's Dilemma.
Yep.
Got exposed to Joel, and I was like, wow, okay, food, entrepreneurship, rural living, farming, like this, and like something that like felt attainable for us. What a better way to do rural economic development than to see farms like Joel's, across the country, right? And so that's really what kind of clicked to us saying, all right, well, we're going to try launching a farm. So we just, did what so many folks have done that I know probably listen to this podcast. We started out with we went to somebody, the neighbor's place and said, hey, so my wife and I had met, we were sort of courting, and we decided to launch a farm together. Not all,
Did you guys buy a farm or?
No.
Okay.
So we started out just, there was a neighbor to her parents' place, and her parents were very instrumental in helping us get going. Like her dad just had just so many skills, like welding. And I didn't, I grew up in a rural place, but not really with I never got a lot of skills like that. We went to a neighbor, had 40 acres, just like in a lot of rural America, at least in our neck of the woods, there's not a lot of farmland. And if it is, no one's really using it. And so it was an older widow who we approached and said, hey, can we fertilize your pastures? And her family had a relationship with her, just knew the lady pretty well. And so she gave us a lease. We started out on, I think it was 20 acres of pasture, roughly. And we started out there and then graduated over time, added more species, started out with just the normal roadmap of some broilers, then you add some turkeys, then you add some pigs or cattle.
And so are you like doing this full time at this point, or what's the income story?
Yeah, so it's a mix. So her dad is a horseshoer, so I was working with him shoeing horses. Okay. So I kind of picked up that trade along the way. And then living very simply and launching that. And then we funded the startup of our farm and it just we applied for this, it was kind of like a business accelerator thing.
Okay.
A friend of mine had shared this opportunity. It's called the Wild Gift, and it's based out of Idaho. They work with young entrepreneurs. At the time it was like $10,000 seed capital plus some business mentorship. And so we just on a whim applied for that. And I would say just the process of you had to write a vision and business model, just thinking through that was so helpful for us. And that's happened at different moments along the way, when we tried to figure out how to fund the next expansion or whatever the business. So we got that. That's how we kind of funded the initial startup. That was in 2006-07 timeframe.
Okay.
And then we kind of we were doing all direct marketing, either through some local restaurants, farmers markets, really beating the pavement. Now we're in a really rural area. We got to drive about 100 miles to get to a decent market.
Yeah. What was your closest market?
Little Rock.
Yeah.
In Arkansas, it's a couple million, 3 million people. It's a very small market, and that's something that's been part of the GrassRoots story. As we've tried to grow, we definitely have had to figure out we don't live right outside of LA or San Francisco. We've got to find a way to get to a customer base that's going to appreciate what we have the money to do it.
So then, how does your farm, you get into farming here? You're doing your own direct marketing. How does that? When did the ideas of GrassRoots Co-Op start to come together? And is that a vision that was between you and your wife, or just bring us that whole origin?
Yeah. So when very early on, from the beginning, when I wrote that initial vision for that business accelerator competition thing we had, we were wanting to be not only just a profitable farm for ourselves and our community, to be able to feed our community, create some job opportunities for ourselves and for some other people in the community. We wanted to be a demonstration farm to help, in some way, educate, share what we're learning with other farms. And so we had this notion of working together with trying to figure out how do you build a community around this, and that just became more and more evident that there was some opportunity there as we grew over the years and started to see so many farmers the issues with processing capacity, market access, storage, inventory management, all those things. And so what happened was, as we grew, we eventually moved off that initial farm over to another farm that we now live on and own, or working to buy.
Yep.
And leased that, and it was about 30 minutes away. So that was a big moment for us. But we did poultry processing on farm. Maybe 15,000 birds a year or something like that. But it was just like you couldn't figure out where one enterprise started and the next one, or one stopped and the next one started.
Yeah.
And it was just like, it was chaos. And my wife and I would just, we'd see each other on the road basically. And it was just not the lifestyle that we wanted, and it's that sort of like mini vertically integrated train wreck is what it was. And nothing was big enough to get enough priority, and it just, the finances were, anyway, and it was just, that was not the lifestyle we wanted. We were already seeing opportunities to collaborate with other farmers, whether it be on like a smaller market opportunity or sharing a load of feed, or maybe it's a load of animals to the processor. And so that was the early origin of, all right, well, maybe there's a cooperative model or something like that here where we could work together to help create a model where we could be more successful, focus on the things we like doing versus the things we don't like doing as much, and start to build a little bit more resilient model here, because it was not, we weren't profitable on the farm. And it was just not, we sort of hit this moment where it was like, golly, the complexity here is just nuts. It's nuts.
Yes. Yes. And it's just a big stressful job, not necessarily a business. That's right. One thing that I feel like talking to other farms is, I don't think it's unhelpful if you're stuck in that. I wanted to have a kind of a hobby farm, but then let's just turn it into a business, and or at least you think you can turn it into a business, but yet you still just kind of want the aspects of a hobby farm. But deciding, I always say if you want a hobby farm, make it a hobby farm. But you really need to take a pretty big next leap to start a business, or else you've just got a job with a ton of headaches and liabilities, huge liabilities.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah, we definitely.
But you recognize that. It's like, okay, it's time to do.
We felt it all over. I mean, it was just like, it took us a while. We were sort of like the frog in the pot of boiling water. I was like, oh my gosh, this is, because I am someone, and I've found a lot in this sort of small farmer space here, is it really attracts a lot of people who love complexity.
Yes.
And that's a awesome thing, but it's also a super dangerous thing. Because complexity is I'm very attracted to it. I think I've become less attracted to it over the years. But it's something that I sort of was like a moth to a flame with that. But that's something that started to it's one of those things where your strengths become your weakness kind of thing. And so my interest in problem solving and complexity led into us having it just was a very complex business where nothing was scaled. Much.
Well, we always talk about, and I think it's a good distinction to remind everyone in regenerative agriculture that, biological complexity is always a good thing. But business complexity is generally never a good thing.
That's a great point. That's a really good point.
And you have to balance that when you're running a business within the regenerative industry, because you can apply that benefit of biological complexity and diversity, and just apply that right over to the business, and it just doesn't apply in the same way at all.
That's right. And there's you got to pick and choose which problems you can really work on and solve.
And what's the impact you want to make? Because at some point, if you want to grow your impact, you do have to become less complex on the business side.
That's right. And I think it's really thinking about what you want to do. I mean, Joel has a very complex business. He's this mini vertically, decently sized, vertically integrated operation. And it works for them. And it works. And it can work for other people too, I guess. But for us, it was about what do we really want to be doing, and what's going to make us successful in our situation? Because we did have the context of we're in Arkansas, very tiny market. There's we were thinking about things like, we're going to build our own processing plant and that kind of stuff. And for one farm to do that, and I hear that a lot from other
yeah.
Oh, yes.
And it's just, I had a couple of moments, like one person that came in at one point when once we'd started the co-op was Mike Lawrence. And I remember him he gave me some.
He's such a wise guy.
He is, yes. And he's just like a straight shooter.
Yes.
And he was just like, do not build your own processing plant. He said, I've gone out and consulted for 100 people who want to do that, and I've told one person they should do it, and it was because they had so much money it didn't matter.
Yes.
That's awesome.
That's definitely a Mike,
Yes.
what Mike would say.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so you guys are recognizing like where you want to focus
Yep.
and the impact that you're wanting to make. So then that's kind of leading to GrassRoots. So how does that get off the ground?
So a couple of things happened. One is, we had built sort of a local network of a local like community of farms in the state, and that we're all sort of sharing best practices, and we one of those farms, Terrell Spencer, you may know, Across the Creek Farm. He had a good relationship with U.S. Wellness.
Okay. Yep.
And John was placing orders with Spence, but he did not. He didn't have enough volume to supply, and so that was one thing that kind of helped galvanize the group. Now, Spence is no longer. He never really became part of GrassRoots.
Okay.
That collaboration or like that sort of co-op model is not for everybody.
Yep.
And we can talk more about that.
Yep.
Because there's lots of lessons learned. I typically say I've learned everything the hard way.
Yep.
A couple of times, and so that there was a big customer opportunity.
Yep.
That required several farms, to
Pull together
to supply. So that was a moment. So definitely shout out to John at U.S. Wellness for
Yep.
that. And then, and he's still, a great customer of GrassRoots. And it was on the pasture poultry side.
Yep.
And then we also didn't have, so for John to get supplied, there had to be USDA processing. So Spence was already working with a processor who basically scaled up to be able to do that. Some challenges on the other side of that as we tried to scale that, but and then we had a partner a nonprofit approach us. Heifer International came to us and said, "Hey, we're looking to help, find some ways to invest in the local farm community here. We want to make, basically what it led to was like they were looking to make some investments in a system that could help." Other farmers, not just one farm, but a group of farmers over time, and help make some system improvements.
What year was that?
This was in 2013
Okay.
time frame. So we'd gone about 7 years doing our own thing, grew the business to probably 400, 500,000 in local sales.
Yep.
And Heifer International comes to like you personally, so then that kind of helps you see a little bit more of. You're already kind of collaborating with a couple people on a few projects, so then that kind of like, okay, well now if there's a capital piece here, how could we do this bigger?
That's right.
Okay.
Because we didn't have we had done some things. We'd gone through a couple more of those like business accelerator things to fund it, and it was family funding and our own personal funding, and then we've done a few of these like business accelerator things. Like one was like for 40,000, one was for 10,000. Like that was super helpful. The capital was helpful, but also the network and the way it forced us to focus on developing a business plan, thinking through it that way.
Yep.
And then we got a VAPG grant about this time. We got a VAPG grant to explore a co-op model.
Okay.
And then we got and that was like a planning grant.
Was that through Heifer?
No, so that was just a USDA grant.
Got it. Okay.
All right. And this all kind of happened around the same time. So this market, U.S. Wellness's demand, Heifer approaching me saying, hey, approached me initially and some of the other farmers in the group and was just like wanting to figure out how they'd had some false starts. And so they approached and initially they were wanting actually me to provide some consulting for some other farmers. I'm like, listen, I am willing to share anything, farmer to farmer, but I don't want to share something that's going to be, create competition. Like, is there a way for us to do this where we're investing in a system? So that kind of led to that sort of system idea. And then we had this VAPG grant that we had done before we had thought about, this was probably 2012, we got a grant to explore like maybe what we were looking at was a cooperative poultry processing facility.
Okay.
And then we were able to use that and applied for a working capital grant. And so that was like maybe a $90,000, $100,000 grant, something like that. Substantial at the time for us, very substantial. And so those three things kind of came together to give us enough momentum. It was like, well, let's give this a shot. And so in 2014 was the first year we really kind of gave it like, let's try this. And it was really just selling to U.S. Wellness as a group, a coordinated group. And
so not like under a co-op entity. You're saying this is just still a coordinated group.
We actually did incorporate as a co-op in 2014. So April of 2014, we established that. And, it was a group of farmers and like 7 or 8 farms.
Yeah.
It was the heifer was, in the conversation.
Yep.
And we really spent that first year just kind of dabbling, just more focused on trying to build some social capital and alignment on what is kind of a vision for this, that's where we actually, as we worked on that vision, it became clear to some farms, like, that's not what I want to do. I want to just do my own local marketing thing, and that's awesome.
Yep.
And so in 2015 is when it became more like, all right, we're going to, like, our farm was like, well, we like this. We want our farm to be focused on the farming side.
Yep.
And then, can we use the vision can GrassRoots become the, basically let the farm focus on the farming side and then go out and develop the market, manage the market opportunities, the customer experience, coordinate the value chain, and figure out the process, not necessarily own the processing. We were not looking to own processing or really even we were trying to stay away from any sort of bricks and mortar. I'd read some article about Organic Valley, and they had this business before bricks saying they had, and it was just not investing in infrastructure. So our approach, at the time was not to invest in infrastructure, but to do market development and then support the supply chain, coordinate that, and then let the farmers focus on farming with some technical support added in. On
business before bricks. I really like that. I think we get that backwards all the time when it comes to, because there's so much infrastructure needs in this world, especially if you're trying to really integrate and go farm to fork. So I guess let's just stay here for a little bit on the co-op structure and dig into it, because it's kind of, as we're talking about it getting off the ground, I think a good segue. So I think one of the areas I feel like I've seen people get this wrong is like, sounds like a great idea. I've got some of these farms that I'm close friends with. We're all trying to do the same thing. Let's try to do it together. Is I feel like everyone messes up dividing roles and responsibility of like that coordinated structure of treating this thing like a business. Who's going to actually do the market development and take that on? Like, who's going to do some of the hard work that nobody else wants to do? So, like, how does that come together? As you're saying, like, 2014, 2015, that's, like, getting off the ground for you guys. How were those decisions made, and how did that settle down?
Yeah, it wasn't easy. And it's been, really messy trying to do that, because I totally, like yes, to everything you said. It's hard enough with just your team. If you have multiple businesses trying to figure that out. And so all of the farms most of the farms, almost all, that were part in the conversation in the early days were farms that were already doing their direct marketing.
Okay.
And those farmers did not, while they were instrumental in helping start GrassRoots, they almost all of them are no longer part of GrassRoots because they had sort of a different vision. They were not just wanting to farm.
Okay.
And really that's, today, GrassRoots, the best farmers we have are the farmers who they don't really want to market. They just want a dependable, they want a farming production model on their farm they feel good about. They want to have dependable sales opportunities. They don't want to figure out processing. They don't want to deal with customers. They want to just really geek out on the farming side of this. And so in the early days, everyone was doing some form of direct marketing. And so that was really a challenging, and it was just very rocky. And what happened was several of those farms, including ours, decided, all right, we're going to make this leap of faith. and put all of our customers into this pool together.
Yep.
Which is super scary.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I was gonna
That-
say,
yes.
hey, go buy from
That's right.
GrassRoots. Okay, yeah,
It's hard to
right.
like reverse that. You know, that
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
That's right. Yeah, that's not a door.
Go
I've heard
back.
the Jeff Bezos thing. Like, look
Yes.
for if it's a door you can easily walk
two-way
in and out
door
of,
versus,
it's a
yeah.
quick
Oh.
decision.
Yes.
Yes.
This
Yeah.
was not.
Yeah.
It's a closed door after that.
Yeah, and I would say that at the a lot of it was me sort of stepping up as a leader at that moment. Like I didn't really realize I had that gear in me, but I just ended up like being a pretty like like the farmers supported me like sort of stepping into this role.
Yeah,
and
okay.
it was rocky at times. Some of them don't appreciate that now. It was a rocky period as we tried to figure out like roles and responsibilities, and these farmers thought they wanted to scale up, but then like, wait a second, that's not what I really want to do.
Yeah. Yep.
And so that was definitely a rocky period. But figuring that out, really, I think it takes getting really clear on a vision. Early on, I came across maybe it was a book called Small Giants, and I heard about a company called Zingerman's that has
Up in Michigan?
Up in Michigan,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
And they have a visioning process that I really latched onto early on, and we did a vision for GrassRoots, and like that was, getting clear on that vision was super helpful.
Yeah.
And I think got buy-in from the farmers, and so we. That sort of co-op model, definitely not a silver bullet at all. Frankly, we were even considering moving. I think who owns the company and the structure is important.
Yeah.
Because if you go out and like if it's this is such a heavy conversation, but if it's owned by private equity, or it's even like take Pasture Bird, like like awesome, really cool what they're doing.
Yep.
But Purdue owns them, and that to me is it's the money's going back to make a family richer, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And the cooperative model really for us was about how do we. The vision was, all right, how do we help the farmers focus on farming, develop this marketing and like supply chain coordination piece that's separate from that, which is GrassRoots, and then. But those farmers still have a say in how that runs. They own that piece. The profits from that would go back to those farmers.
Yep.
Like the farmers still have control of that. That was really the vision there. And but over time, we found that if things are going well, farmers don't really want to be involved, and they'd love to get like some profit distributions. They also don't really have a passion for governance.
Yeah.
And so, one of the things that we're thinking about is, well, do we open up and maybe create a couple of other classes of ownership? Maybe our processing partner get a few seats at the table, maybe some employees.
Not just farmer ownership. you're saying.
Correct. Yeah. So like sort of we have this like value chain we've created over the years. So we did it. We have we can talk more about this, but a really close partnership with a processing company that we we own a equity stake in.
Yep.
And they're a big part of our strategy, our execution,
And a lot of what you do impacts them.
That's right.
Yeah.
But back to Brooks's point, like, because we do see co-ops start and kind of flounder. It seems like it's because no one really knows who's in charge, and no one takes
That's
that
right.
initiative to put that vision forth.
Yeah.
To be that leader. So what keeps Cody in this co-op model? What keeps you motivated and your incentive aligned within the co-op structure? Because there's co-ops that work, and Organic Valley is a co-op that
That's
works.
right.
Like, what is it makes it
you
work?
You don't find a lot of young co-ops. I mean, Organic Valley is a young co-op, actually. They're from like the 80s, I think, when they had formed.
Yep.
But you don't see very many new co-ops. I don't know of any, actually, really. And so what keeps me motivated, and so I'm passionate about this sort of some sort of stakeholder ownership model.
Yeah.
And I also want the supply chain actors, and whether it's the farmers or processors or even employees in the business having ownership versus some really wealth extracting equity partner or something like that.
Yep.
Right? So that's like a core sort of tenet of me as a person.
Yep.
Because I want to see this money going back into rural communities.
Yep.
Kind of tying it back to like I had this moment where it's like I grew up in rural America. It's amazing. I really appreciate it. I want resources to go back into that so that we know we have less of a rural brain drain. There's more opportunities there.
Yep.
So that's part of me, and then also another part of me is like I just was hungry to make this thing successful, and I love to learn. And I went to college, got a degree in physics. I'm not a physicist. I love to solve problems, though, and that's what sort of problem solving is what kind of came out of my college career, I would say. And so I love working on problems. So I'm an eager learner to do that. And so I just started going out and figuring out, okay, what can I learn that's going to give us the best opportunity to be able to be successful with this model? So there was definitely, we talked earlier about, before we started taping here, around different business operating systems. And so, we started this, it was really just kind of a mess in the beginning, and, has become less of a mess over time. And so moments where we, read about, the EOS operating system model scaling up, like there was just like some key, it also became a moment where the podcasting world really took off, and so there's just so many ways to learn and resources to learn. So I just like constantly was listening to Audible or a podcast, trying to learn and educate myself. Brought in a business coach and started to hone my business skills basically, and team leadership, and then invest in our team.
So, but like if I'm like another aspect of this is like just like the economic reward. So like if I'm saying I'm listening to this, I want to go start a co-op, and I'm going to be like, you're the tip of, it sounds like a lot the tip of the spear of, getting the team together, putting that vision and creating it out there. What would you recommend from someone who's starting a workshop or a co-op if I've got some partners in my area, but like I want to be the guy to get this entity put together, I'm going to be whatever you want to call it, the president, the CEO, and figure out all the marketing side. Like, what is the entity ownership structure that person should take? Like, how should they, obviously they'll pay themselves a salary and stuff, but like they get a certain piece of the pie, right? Is that okay?
So I would say, really think about like, what's the value proposition that you're creating for your farmers? And you don't have to be a co-op to be able to do what we're doing today. You can be something different. You could be an LLC and have different ownership models and those kind of things. So I definitely don't think that one of the things about the co-op model is it does tend to be, if you're a farmer co-op, it limits who you can have on your board, and it sort of like boxes you in, which can be a good thing in some ways. It can help you stay on mission, but also can be limiting in the types of partners you can have and the board you can develop for yourself. And so I would say that, but the first thing is like, well, what is the thing this co-op is going to actually do and solve? Like, what's the value proposition, and getting really clear on that. Because to start a co-op for just like a co-op's sake is not, it's not worth it. It's not worth it. And it also is a very difficult, if you're going to try to raise some kind of capital, it can be a difficult model if you're going to go out into the, I mean, you can't have common, you can't sell common stock. So you can only do like preferred stock, which is essentially like just a note, and so now for us, we didn't have a bunch of rich farmers who were able to put into this. We funded through through some grant opportunities through like the USDA. And then also through our partnership with Heifer. And so that wasn't why we created a co-op, but that became our ownership structure did allow us to find some strategic ways to bring in capital that it wasn't like the tail wagging the dog, but it definitely ended up being beneficial on that front. And so that's something to think about. Like if you are going to try to fund your business in some way,
you can't ignore it.
Like, is it, are you going to go after nonprofit funding? You're going to go after, what kind of funding you're going to go after? And, how does the business model play into that? And I wouldn't say, don't select a business model just because of that. But that's something to think about. And then the co-op model takes a lot of work. It is like, in some ways overly complex, because it does, like, you have to train farmers how to participate in a governance model, and as the business grows and becomes more complex, most of them may not have interest, or they just may not have the ability, the background and knowledge to be able to be a really good, solid, board member for that.
That's all super interesting to me. But I can see that now at this point where you guys have scaled up, you probably have some really key team members that you you want their input on the direction of the company, and they're in the best seat to give input on,
That's right.
the vision and some key decisions that we need to make for the future. So having those
the
different
employees, it's certainly, we found that over time, the employees in the business and our processing partner are really the ones that have the most like insight and understanding and just like interest, in the participating at like the more strategic level. Whereas farmers are typically more of like, as long as we do like yearly grower agreements with our farmers and lock that in, they like to participate like in like when it comes to, hey, well, there's a farmer board that gets to decide on the pricing structure and those kind of things. It's a conversation between farmers and the business. But we found that from a strategic business standpoint, the employees and the processing partners really kind of bring more value actually at this stage.
So one thing that we know we want to unpack, so let's kind of go from the co-op gets started. You guys have obviously had a lot of growth over the years. And I want to talk about did you have a point you want to?
No, keep going.
Okay, so I want to talk about customer acquisition, kind of where were the breakthroughs that this thing started to really get legs and grow?
Yeah, so, we've had success. We've had plenty of hurdles too, because we're not that big of a company. We're in the $10 million range, so we're not really huge at all. We're small in a lot of circles. But when we started out, we had the John Wood account.
Yes.
And then we thought, well, gosh, what a great model. We'll do that. Let's go find a bunch more of those.
Okay.
And we couldn't find
There's not very many. Yeah.
So we were definitely more of a wholesale business. Like that was our approach and strategy in the beginning, was more wholesale.
Okay.
And we did, and then that was in 2014. 2015, when a few of the bigger farmers put in their direct-to-consumer customer base, which is just like local restaurants and local like one-off families. That's when we did add a more of a B2C type selling strategy, but we were still more focused on finding those larger wholesale customers to scale the business. And so we kept really trying to do that. We were trying to grow in Arkansas. We tried things like going through local broadliner, like local like restaurant distribution company. And got some. We got in, and there was lots of interest, but there just wasn't. There's probably 20 restaurants in Arkansas that sell really good. Like that buy locally, and so we really struggled. And at that time, we were like, it was just some of these smaller farmers. We were kind of pushing them out of market, and that did not feel good at all. It created some real tension.
Competing for a narrow slice.
And so we thought, well, okay, let's try to expand wholesale outside. So we tried. We hired a wholesale guy, brought him in. We got an account out in San Francisco, and we were selling out there, and it was. We couldn't get the margins we were really looking for, and so it's like, okay, let's go back and try something. Let's kill that. And so we thought, well, let's dabble. I had someone that I'd met actually in one of these business accelerator courses. Just over the years, like all the different networking opportunities, like that stuff is just so important. You never know when it can benefit you. And so this person I knew had some background in more like direct response marketing. Brought her in and said, hey, let's try Facebook. At that time we'd set up we had a WooCommerce site and kind of set that up, and where we're doing our own distribution, our own pick and pack, and it was really just local, like in the state sales. We'd moved from like a home delivery to where we were doing the home delivery to a like a shipping. We made the decision at one point that we were like, okay, we are not a distribution company.
A logistics
final
company.
mile.
Oh my goodness. That was one of my favorite days in business together, is when we decided that we're not a logistics company. We used to do the buying clubs, local pickup model, and we had 50 different locations, trucks everywhere, throughout the weekend, and so much complexity. And like the numbers still looked okay, but that is when you decide to vertically integrate, like you're doing production, even though you might not be doing processing, a lot of people are doing processing. You're in the processing business.
That's right.
You're in the fulfillment business if you're doing your own pick and pack, and then you're in the marketing and distribution business. And then you know, if you throw logistics on top of that, it's just one other area that needs a lot of capital to throw into it too.
Correct.
So, so you guys did end up embracing then at that point shipping through like UPS and FedEx.
Yeah, that's right. And we just decided we were not going to be doing any, and this is the benefit of like having some sort of operating system that sort of funnels you down in some clear priorities and has you questioning like, you know, what are you really going to do? You know,
if everything's important, nothing's important.
That's right. Yep. Absolutely. So we started doing that, and then we are also doing like using a local distribution company to do restaurant deliveries. And it was 2017, and we were having a moment like, well, do we even have a market here or not? You know, and or maybe it was 2016, and we tried Facebook for a quarter, and we're like, okay, if we can bring in 300 new customers, then we'll consider that a big success. So we did. In the next year, we said, all right, we're going to be a e-commerce first company. That was like a moment. It was like a statement that I made at the very first of the next year, and because it got us all focused, and we started to build a team around that. Yeah. And so
that's an important one when you say build a team around that. You know, we actually came to that conclusion not long ago when we had a side of our wholesale business that was still, I don't know what, 20% of revenues, maybe $1 million in revenue every year. We're like, okay, we could try to seriously continue to grow this thing. It could probably support, a salesperson, but you got to go out and hire a salesperson who's not going to touch the digital marketing and e-commerce side of the business. So even from your talent, your sales channel determines so much. It determines your technology, a lot of your infrastructure, and then ends up determining the team too. Yeah, and absolutely. It's freeing when you can focus and get a team focused on one thing.
That's right. And there was some real tension in that moment because wholesale aligns well with like volume for farmers. Yes. Right.
Yeah.
And but we were not getting the traction that we needed there in the a profitable traction, I would say. And so a focus on e-commerce became. It really did like create tension between that volume and the focus on like developing a business model that actually can grow and become profitable. Yeah. And so so we have always kept we do have a wholesale component to our business, and that's really important still. It's about 30% of our business. Okay. Mm-hmm. But it is it's not the it's like at that time it was a much smaller piece. And we were seeing the traction, and it was really important that we focused, and we had to focus. We were not going to be able to do e-commerce very well if we did not get focused, because it's so complex.
Yes,
too. That in itself.
Even like making decisions around, okay, inventory is low. Do I fill this wholesale PO, or do I have it go to my high margin e-commerce customers? Yep. Or do and then if that's sold out, those customers got to go somewhere else. You're losing those customers. There's it competes for every resource in the business.
That's right. Yep. And so 2017, 18, we became like very, very focused on e-commerce, trying to grow that. Moved to a Shopify site in early 2019, had a big jump, once we did that. We started out with subscription, and we're having a hard time with our
I wanted to ask you about this because the last time you were here, you guys were doing subscriptions, and I think you guys were pretty bullish on it at the time. We weren't. We're like, oh, dang it, we're missing out. Now today, 70% of our revenue comes from subscriptions. I don't think you guys do it anymore, right?
No. And now I'm saying we should do subscriptions. So we do a membership program now.
That for loyalty and
and it's kind of like it's almost like a CSA model where it's like people prepay, and then with that prepay they get a discount because our customers, we found that they really like the a la carte aspect. And for us, we were actually not able to execute a subscription program very well at the time because we didn't follow the butcher box or like Moink model where it's like a curated box that you get. And I know they've gotten more and more away from like, it is pretty custom, I think, for about everybody. But so we were having a hard time, like people wanted chicken breast and we didn't have enough and we couldn't. So we just decided to go like, all right, we're going to go to a la carte. And we did that. It was
because basically people were subscribing to things that would just be out of stock.
That's correct. It was like kind of a build your own box type model, and the tech was really clunky. We were on WooCommerce, and it was, it was tough.
Getting subscription tech to work right for the customer, for the customer journey, and what's on their mind while they're trying to become a customer. It's quite the puzzle.
That's right. And I wasn't aware. I'm not even sure where GrassCart was at that moment. But that would have been a good solution.
Can you back up just a little bit to like getting those first e-commerce customers, because I feel like that can be such a huge gap for someone who's getting into e-commerce. And they can get some of the things figured out, get the inventory in place, get the website up, but how do we get any kind of acquisition traction started? How do we get more visitors to our website? And what's that engine look like? What did it look like for you guys to form that traffic engine to get that visibility?
So it was definitely a different day. It was very meta Facebook focused in the early. We actually didn't do the first quarter. We tried it. We tried sort of some digital advertising. First thing we hired an agency that was it was a mess. It didn't do anything. And then we had this freelancer friend who came in and did some direct response ads and was very just highly call to action was to purchase, and at the time didn't have concept of CAC and what we could afford.
And you hire this person as on contract for a freelance. Okay.
And so she just did some very basic creative. It was just like a one person show for the most part. And then the next quarter we moved to a step up and went to a couple of other freelancers that had that worked together. It was 2 or 3 people, what I wouldn't call an agency.
And how'd you find them?
Through this other friend of ours.
Okay, yeah. Okay.
And so, they had some, so that's when we layered on doing paid search. So, some the Google stuff.
Yep.
And, then we started to see just more customers come in, because the Google side is demand capture. People are out searching for this stuff. And so at that, we were able to at that time, and I had no concept of this, the difference between what I'm not a social, I don't get on social and use that. My wife likes it, but, the Facebook was very direct response, interruption marketing type stuff that ended up being effective. And we were driving them just straight to the website. There weren't custom landing pages or anything like that. And then we did some Google. And I think in retrospect, it was just the freelancer, the friend of mine that we hired, just understood Facebook a lot better.
Yeah, so that's where you started.
Yeah, but paid search is where I would start if in most cases, just if you can capture the lower hanging fruit there.
Yeah, right.
Well,
you brushed over it, but keyword, you hired somebody.
Yes. Yeah, I didn't know anything about it.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, because it's so complex.
To
Try to get these ads started yourself. I've with 400 GrassRoots clients, I came across one client who I was amazed. They did their own acquisition campaigns, and they got into Facebook Business Manager and geeked out about it. That was the only farm I ever came across that was successful at doing it without hiring somebody.
Yeah. And I think in some ways. It's we were talking about this before we started taping, I think, but you need someone who's passionate about that, because really on the team, because you've got to be able to manage someone. You got to know enough to be able to manage someone doing it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And one of the mistakes that I made was not getting in the weeds and understanding that soon enough. And, we are still we never have built enough in-house capacity. That's sort of a journey we're on right now, is really trying to, at some point you need to bring some of this stuff in-house. And I would say it's also important to, there's got to be someone on the team who takes a real interest in digging in and understanding this enough to be able to manage somebody, whether it's internal or external, to do this stuff. Because there's just and also not just understanding the marketing tactics and the platforms enough to be able to manage someone, but also understanding the building blocks of an e-commerce business and things like, well, what can you afford to pay for a customer?
Yes.
And how do you think about lifetime value and the payoff over time?
So that's what I was going to say to somebody who's listening is yes, go out there and hire somebody to do it. Getting a business manager yourself, it's a whole new world. There's a ton to learn. And then even if you learn the basics today, it changes in 3 months. So you need somebody who can focus on learning the next thing. But where you need to focus is on measuring understanding enough, but also getting into the numbers enough to be able to measure the effectiveness of it, coming up with the right KPIs and know, is it working? Because at first it's an experiment, and you can't improve what you don't measure. So it's really, really easy to just blindly throw advertising dollars at the wall.
Or to give up too soon. If you don't know what you're looking at and what you're measuring, you can give up way too soon, because it takes a bit of funding to get that, those campaigns going.
And to have the confidence to say, well, because you talk to one of these agencies and they just they seem like they've got it all figured out,
Right, yeah.
and they it can be very intimidating, and I think a lot of entrepreneurs, maybe all, struggle with imposter syndrome, and it's well, who am I to say that they are wrong, or they are, that this is not sustainable for our business? And so being able to get enough confidence to be able to say, all right, I know you think that this is a great return on ad spend in platform, but what I'm seeing here at the overarching business level is that it's costing us $200 to acquire a customer. At our margins, it's going to take us a year to pay them off, and that doesn't work for us. So I need to pay off in 6 months or 3 months. Or
our
whatever.
acquisition campaigns finally took off when we just discovered two things. Like, what is the lifetime value of one of our customers? And that told us, well, here's how much we could spend to go get a customer. And once we had those two pieces of information, we had what we needed to go to an agency or go to someone to scale our campaigns, and we had the parameters. We know exactly what our CAC can be.
And if you don't figure those things out first, you end up treating that agency partner as a consultant, like you're saying. Well, who am I to tell them they're wrong? But you really need to treat them as hey, you're working with them because you don't have the capacity to hire somebody full time on your team. So you should be treating them as an extension of your team, and have some numbers to be able to agree, and everybody is held accountable to.
Accountability, but then the confidence again to go ahead and spend up to that CAC amount that you determined, because it was an amazing exercise when we went through the entire economics of a 12-month rolling calendar of the economics. And we began to see that if we don't spend this money on customer acquisition, we will be less profitable 12 months from now. That was the confidence to say, this overhead called marketing is a magical overhead. It can print more money in the form of getting more customers. As long as you know your profitability, your lifetime value, you can dial that in. And now you're free to scale.
That's right.
To that limit.
Easier said than done, though, right? There's so much complexity in this, and so if you're fighting fires like, hey, the water's not working on the farm. Then how are you going to get the bandwidth to be able to go out and figure out, what are my unit economics, and what is my payback period, and then thinking about that into a cash flow model that's actually going to pencil out for you. I mean, there's a lot of complexity in this, and so there's trying to figure out ways to keep it simple, I think, and so I think the beginning is just find some way to get your name out there, and it's really like you find one channel or one maybe it's direct mail, maybe it's beating the most successful farmers I typically see are within a driving distance to a decent sized market. And that's the easiest,
And they're employing some guerrilla marketing, some really unique things in that area that is only scalable for them to do. And it's hard for someone else to compete with. And a lot of times it's more tangible stuff too that doesn't require as much digital marketing know-how and skill set.
That's right. And I think you got to really understand you definitely have to. Your margin profiles, when one of the things that have mistakes, whatever I made was I listened to a lot of different things and listened to these different e-commerce podcasts. It's like, golly, they're rocking how they, and the margin profile for one of our businesses is very different from like a t-shirt company or
makeup.
A company,
you hear the makeup, that's a common
70-80% margins.
Right. The cost of shipping is nothing.
The makeup digital marketing case studies are always hilarious because they're so common out there. And it's like, with that margin, you can make some crazy CAC numbers work.
Right. And that's where when you go to an agency that just works with those kind of clients, it can be a real mismatch if you don't get clear on they can have a 2-to-1 or 1-to-1 return on ad spend, and it's awesome. Well, that might not be the case for an e-commerce company that's making 40-30% margins, and so
once we started tracking these things, we felt like we'd always done a pretty good job on loyalty and retention. But once we started tracking these things, we started to realize that in order for us to actually be able to get kind of crazy on the front end to go acquire a customer, we need to do a really good job on the back end to make sure that customer sticks with us. So what are some of the big things you guys have done over the years when it comes to doing a good job at loyalty and keeping a customer?
So I think it's an area that we actually just had a team meeting day before yesterday, actually, and where it was we're going to really focus on that more right now and just getting, seeing if we can move the needle more there. And I would say that's where, before you start driving much traffic at all to your site, get those systems in place, get your basic email systems in place, have some sort of welcome series when they come in, make sure you're capturing emails. You have some sort of,
build that funnel.
That's right. Yeah. And where you're capturing those customers and they're not churning out, you're trying to drive them back in, and then build a little bit of like some data so you can understand what those trends look like. Because like you said earlier, once you understood your lifetime value, then you can start to make some decisions on, some bigger investments.
I made this change. What happened?
That's right.
All throughout the funnel.
Yeah. And so one of the key things we've done that's really been helpful is sort of segment our customers, the way we look at our customers into just, new versus returning. That's just one, it's very basic, but and we also have we do recently acquired, and then we do, non-recently acquired. So anybody acquired prior to 180 days, 6 months ago, basically.
Yeah.
And they have a slightly different behavior and performance there.
Yep.
And really looking at, when we do our forecasting, it's based off, we segment into those 3 groups, and then really trying to figure out, how do we, what tactics and what things do we do to really serve those different groups of customers, whether it's onboarding the new customers in the right way and we find that if we can get them to place that second order, they're a lot stickier.
Yeah.
And so it's really, focusing on things like that, and then really thinking through, at the end of the day, it's just like being at the farmer's market. Like, what is the conversation you're having to them? Like, think about the conversation.
Yep.
Think of, like you're at the store with someone's at the butcher counter. Really, how do you warm them up? How do you not just ask them to marry you day one kind of thing?
How you address their objections, their concerns,
and build the relationship. And I am absolutely convinced, unless you've got some sort of, if you look at all the successful models here, I would say in the D2C space, in this sort of premium meat world, it's all about lifetime value. It's all about that retention. The margins are not good enough. They're too thin to be like you can have a wallet like Ridge wallets. They can live off of just one and done customers. And we can't do that. We have to drive lifetime value to make this work. And so, don't spend much at all on acquisition until you figure out, you get your retention.
Yeah, because you have nothing to spend. So the membership program is new, right? Is it being well received? I mean, and how does that structure look? I'm looking at it on your website. It seems like it's kind of like
the craziest thing about loyalty tactics is they're hard to measure because you don't know until 12 months later. It's like, did they spend more?
It makes sense to me. So our number one objection from customers, they always mention price. It's just it's expensive.
Yes.
And so we are. My perspective is we can definitely give discounts if we have longer term commitment from the customers. And so what this is we're testing it. We started it in I guess January really, where it's almost kind of like a CSA or a prepay. Like they pay, I believe it's $39 a month.
39. Yeah, I have it pulled up here. $39 a month and $39 a month in monthly credit, which I think is really cool.
Yeah, so it all goes straight to credit.
So I know, because that's a big objection, because we did a paid membership at one point. And we started at like $100 a year, then we backed it on $49 a year. But and even though we've packed so much value in there, where it was all you had to do is place a couple orders and it was paid for and stuff. But it was still just people have a greater fear of losing something than the gain that, they get. So it's still, and then plus the way that they would say it was kind of confusing. It was hard to quantify it all and stuff. So it's just getting messy in people's mind. So that was always my concern about paid memberships. But you guys just take it right out of the equation by saying it's $39 a month and you get that right back every month.
Yes, it essentially becomes just cash back. And so thinking about a cash back model versus just a discount off the top. We're moving more and more to a cash back model because it just incentivizes customers
the next order,
to place the next order. And so, we did think long and hard about, is it a membership that we're looking at to boost our profitability in some way?
Right.
It's what are the things we can really bolt on here that are going to add enough value? And really just coming back to, what's the goal of this? And the goal is just to help create loyalty. And so the approach, I came across somebody else who was using a membership like this. It was a makeup company actually. And I thought that's interesting because we have customers who want discounts, but we want them to be loyal. And so this is a great I mean, it's like almost like a co-investment between the farmer and the customer in some way.
And you're getting a micro commitment. It's $39.
That's right.
But it's a step that they take to say, I'm going to be loyal.
And we find that our customers order typically around it's like a 3-month cadence, so quarterly cadence.
Yep.
And so we tried to do it in a way that gave pretty close to that. It would be a good base for them to place an order on a quarterly basis. And our AOVs are in that 200 range, and so it kind of it wasn't like, but free shipping's at 150, and so it kind of like was 39 was a number that felt like it was just maybe the right level, and then push. We'll see how it works, but so far we have like close to a couple hundred members.
Okay. I love it. If you're gonna do a membership, I think you guys have done it really well, because like I say, ours was, people did like we called it tribe. So once they joined, they were part of the club. So like a lot of the people who joined were just the loyal customers who didn't even want to put a pencil to theirs. I love what you guys do, so I'll join. So you got that element of like, the micro commitment. They joined something, like you guys have the 2 different levels, the barn raisers. So you're like, okay, there's a exclusivity feel that they get to it. But just for anyone listening, I just want to make sure no one's listening thinking, well, $39 a month that they get in credit, isn't that all washed? So like, then it's 10% cash back on every order. So you guys are really prioritizing credit, cash back. That's right. Because you use it again. Yep. I mean, just like, like Menards gets people with the rebate, you come back. It's like every time, it's just because everyone remembers that rebate. But here it's like even a little bit further where they've actually joined.
Yes, that's right.
Cool.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay, so one thing, last thing that I know we wanted to touch on was just like scale, like future, like, for you guys, like, how do you think about, what's in your, actually probably the more fun way to ask the question is like, what keeps you up at night, like right now in the business?
Yeah. So, we're coming out of an interesting period where we'd spent years working with Heifer International, and we sort of pivoted away. We still have a great relationship with them, but, we had this, this is one of the like pluses and minuses of figuring out where your funding, like your funding can drive, let me see, how do I want to say this? So it's really important to be mindful of where your funding source drives strategy and can affect strategy.
There's influence there.
Yeah, that's right. Like if you're taking VC capital and they want to do a major exit, like that's a specific train you're getting on there. Right?
Yep.
And be prepared for them to start saying things like, hey, well, you got to find a way to source from some cheaper option, right?
The margin has to go up, whatever.
That's right. In our case, we had a nonprofit partner that was sort of like VC philanthropy, maybe in some way. I didn't sort of think about it that way at all at the time. Like I wouldn't even know what VC was back when we started.
Right.
And so they wanted to see impact. So it was a focus on growth and prioritizing the number of farmers we were working with, which that's awesome. Yeah. I love that. Yeah. But it was we deprioritized profitability because of that. Yep. And, it's in some ways that relationship, there was very, lots of moments where the tail wagged the dog kind of thing. Yeah. And, we would, invest in things that would make them happy versus actually be good for the business from the long-term and profitability standpoint. Yep. And so we're at a phase right now where we've kind of gone through as we've moved away from like being so connected in that relationship to, we've sort of downsized, focused on profitability, really trying to, get build some internal marketing capacity, because as we were focused on growth, we kind of had this like shiny object syndrome, like we got to find the right big marketing, whatever, to be able to do it. When in fact, honestly, we should have been developing more of the capacity internally. And I think that's a phase that at some point you've got to do that, at a certain scale. Maybe it's, 3, 4, 5 million, you start to do a little bit of that.
Yep.
And so, at this stage, we're kind of coming out of a year of like really tightening the belts, focusing on profitability. If we're not trying to light the world on fire with growth at all. And I would say that, that's sort of where we are. And it's been a good but painful moment as we've kind of
different season.
Yeah. Different season. Yeah. But as far as what keeps me up at night, I would say that it is, this is as I go around the industry here and visit with different people, it's a struggle for people. I mean, the margins are not great. Yeah. There's always this, you you can tend to have too many eggs in one basket kind of thing. And,
Yep.
and sort of how these companies go from, say, a $3-4 million business to like a $10 million business or even beyond it's really tricky, and it takes a lot of capital. It's very capital intensive. There's no silver bullets. I mean, D2C can be awesome, but it's also, it's a lot
of work.
It's a lot of work and expertise that's needed.
Yep.
And so it's really, my nature has always been to find ways to collaborate. And I think that, the things that I'm excited about into the future is sort of how can farmers and, organizations in this community find ways to collaborate where it makes sense. I don't think it's like one big thing, I mean,
But multiple breakthroughs because of some collaboration.
Whether it's like either on like, a wholesale opportunity for trim, or it's I don't know, like you're buying down the price of shipping costs of FedEx or whatever it might be. And so for me, the thing that, how do we create a more, like stable environment for these, and I think it's through collaborations in some ways, but it's not through full integrations. And it's definitely, it feels like a moment where, especially with this crazy cattle market where a lot of farmers are struggling to figure out like, it's a lot easier to go sell at the sale barn. And so this is a moment where I think it could be, a lot of processors are going out of business because they don't have the volume going through, because when you can sell a
sale barn, sell it early, or
that's right.
Don't even finish that animal.
That's right. So it's this could be a moment in this cattle market where this space takes a little bit of a step back from a direct marketing standpoint, and certainly as the barrier to entry from a D2C standpoint, like broadens, like is easier. Then you do see some folks jumping into that, but that's also a thing to be careful about, I think, for folks. And so anyway, it's just an interesting landscape out there, I would say.
Yeah. Where do you see regenerative food supply chain going long term, as far as if there's going to be a large capacity of regenerative food in the food supply? How is it going to happen? Is it going to happen through tens of thousands of the rogue food movement, tens of thousands of small little $50,000 to $100,000 business units all over the country, all surrounding all these cities? We call that the rogue food movement, maybe, or whatever. Or is it folks like what a lot of our GrassRoots clients are doing, or what you guys are doing? You're growing to 1 to 10, maybe 20 million and beyond. If you or is it just hooking onto the industrial infrastructure, like Paul Greaves, that partnership that they did with Pasture Bird was just that was saying, okay, there's this industrial infrastructure, we can plug in regenerative supply into that. So where do you see it going, and where do you see the best strategy? Where are you making your bet? I mean, we obviously are making our bets.
Sure.
It's obvious we're making our bets, but why?
Well, I think what I would love to see, and what I think would be healthier for rural America in the country, is something in the more decentralized, like more decentralized than like going to Purdue and hooking onto that. I think maybe is it 1,000, couple thousand, 10,000, 10 million, $5 to $15 million companies out there. I think there is a need to have a certain level of scale and coordination so that you can have, like in our case, we own 49% in a processing company, and that has been a strategic relationship that has created a lot of opportunities for other farmers in that community, because they have been able to add services, expand, because of us being an anchor customer that allows for other farmers to have access to a different level of processing, more capacity than they would if GrassRoots wasn't part of that system. And so I do think there is a need for some level of coordination and scale that will help sort of stabilize some of the regional infrastructure that's needed. And so I do tend to lean more towards a mix of those like 10 to $15 million companies.
We need more of those.
And then you have some of those smaller folks will have access to piggyback on, maybe they just want to do their own direct marketing at a local farmers market, or maybe they can graduate over time into plugging into one of these bigger.
Right. There'll always be room for that.
That's right.
But it's a smaller, those smaller operations is always probably going to be a smaller percentage of the food
That's
chain
right.
Than what you think.
That's right. And if you think take ButcherBox, they're what, $500-600 million company at this stage. When they started, there wasn't this kind of thing out there. Like, we don't need ButcherBox anymore in this country. I mean, I think they're actually a cool company in some ways. Like, I think Mike is an awesome dude. But it's a much better system if we have it going to U.S. production.
Yes.
To these a more decentralized model than even ButcherBox has. It's not and we can do that now. We can do that really well. And it's a lot easier. So if you just take that $600 million and move it over to a small farmer network across the country, like, that's going to have a transformational impact on the rural economies.
Well, I've always thought about it. I mean, the consumer is always going to, in my belief, is the consumer will always go to the path of least resistance. So what is the most convenient? So as regenerative food supply builds, if it's most convenient for the consumer, that's what they're going to choose. Which the industrial infrastructure, I mean, they've built around making it convenient for consumers. So we just believe that it's going to be our job to just interject ourselves and give ourselves visibility to those consumers that are naturally going to go to the grocery store, whatever is the most convenient path of least resistance, and say, hey, listen, we actually have an option, and guess what? It's convenient, but it has to be convenient, or else you won't build it.
Yeah, that's a prerequisite. And then our story ends up being, we view a little bit as, everyone tries to think, if you start following the business gurus, what's the moat that protects you from competition? So it's like, well, if there is a wave of people who are partnering with the industrial guys to get at a industrial regenerative product, our story needs to be what protects us from that. A lot of customers who buy from us, they're buying from us, and they don't know anything about regenerative.
That's right.
But they see 7 brothers working together on a farm, and that's cool, and they look like they're farming and making decisions that I would probably make if I was a farmer. So that is what we're banking on being kind of, no matter what competition, happens, in the next 10 years, that's what's going to be able to be something that nobody can recreate.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that is the competitive advantage, is that story piece. And the impact of that, and the ability to develop the trust with the customer.
The relationship.
And I think at the end of the day, the vision I want to see is just more customers buying direct from farmers. And that's, we can do that. And it can be in all kinds of innovative ways. There's a really awesome company out, Mount Joy Chicken. Have you come across these folks? They're out in Seattle area. And they are, it's not fully farmer owned, but it is partially farmer owned. Like, imagine a regenerative, like, Chick-fil-A model. And so they're doing, like, sort of whole bird. They basically built a menu around a whole chicken. And they're sourcing from local farmers, very transparent in their ingredients, and it's partially owned by some farmers. And there's a lead farmer, Grant. I can't remember.
Oh, Grant Jones. Grant, I did see that the other day, actually, just a couple of days ago. I was on his LinkedIn.
And to me, that's really interesting. It is. Like, that's something that's, like, very convenient, very customer oriented. And that to me is like, frozen meat can only get you so far in this, but it can get you a long way. I mean, if you got, there's a $1 billion market there. But when you look at something like Mountain Joy, it's a pretty interesting model. So,
well, I know this has been really helpful to everybody listening, but just to give people even something more concrete to go home from, obviously getting inspired by your guys' story and what all you're doing. But we were talking before we recorded, just different people that we follow and mentors that have been helpful to you in the business. Like, what have been, I don't know if it's books and people you followed from a distance, but what have been some key people that you feel like has, like, helped you grow as an entrepreneur?
So definitely a huge fan of the, having some sort of operating system for the business, whether it be something like a scaling up or a EOS model. So books on that front. When it comes to, like, people management, Patrick Lencioni's been a huge go-to for me over the years. It's when it comes to, like, digital marketing, I think this guy Taylor Holiday at Common Thread Collective has a podcast that I love, and he does a really good job. I mean, he has a agency that's more the traditional e-commerce, so provides support to the more traditional e-commerce support, but some of the best information on really thinking through like your how your business works, like how to create a thinking through margin and how that relates to how much you can spend on marketing and those kinds of things. And so big help there.
Well, what else I really just enjoyed from this conversation and has become evident is that like you're really big on networking and getting around people who can just who can pour into you guys and pour into what you're doing. And that does, you create a network effect within your friends and business mentors that you get around. So I think it sounds like you've done a really good job of getting yourself out of the business and into some rooms to where you can meet some really cool people. And that's translated back into, what you guys have done. So that's definitely something I would encourage if you're listening. You got to take that time every now and then to get off the farm and go get in some circles with some people that are ahead of you or are doing some really cool things that will end up translating into results in the business. So.
Yeah, I mean, without the relationships that I have in the industry with farmers like you all and others around, I mean, it's one of our core values is relationships, not transactions. And so that focus on, and that goes to customers, it goes to farmers, it goes to our processing partner. Like this is not a winner take all market. It's not it's just, and I heard someone say, what was the phrase they used? Trade secrets as a verb. I think it was maybe the folks out at Family Cow, maybe.
Okay.
And I love that. It's just that open network. People are sharing a lot, and it's just because it's a hard business to make it in, and having these relationships are awesome in both like good times and bad times. To have people to talk to.
Yeah, and if you feel like you're a little more introverted and this is just not part of who you are, there's a good book out there called The Introvert's Edge. It's all about if you're an introvert, how you can be the best networker in the room at the end of the day. So, well, this has been super helpful, Cody. Really, we've obviously known each other over the years, but it's been really cool just to go a little bit deeper and get it all recorded for the audience to hear from too. So appreciate you coming. We'll have to do it again because there's obviously other areas that we could dig into.
It was a blast. Thanks for having me.
Yep, cool. Thanks, Cody.